All right. Going from what Dr. Saxman wrote to a piece by Stephen Collinson at CNN about the peril, the horror of Donald Trump keeps growing nearly 8 months after he left the White House. This is some weird shit. You know, this new book by Woodward and Bob Costa, I think it's Bob Costa, called Peril, this one that excerpts have been talked about now on CNN and MSNBC, and I would imagine on the Fox Sewer, but a different way on the Fox Sewer and these right-wing propaganda outlets. They will attempt to minimize what Woodward and Costa wrote. Or they'll try to suggest that General Milley, I'll get to this in a second, should be tried for treason. That's what I heard somebody say. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Dr. Saxman, you're right. Anyway, there's some more evidence to the growing case that a second orange vomit presidency would be more extreme and more dangerous than the first. I think most of us understand this. The cult members of the Trump cult, the Christian fascists, they couldn't care less. They don't understand shit with a face full of it. But the rest of us do. And in this, in new examples of the threat that Trump poses, Collinson puts it this way: a bombshell book by Washington Post legend Bob Woodward and his newspaper stablemate and co-author Robert Costa laid bare another view into the frightening, unchained few weeks inside Trump's inner circle around the Capitol insurrection. The problem posed by Trump is now not an aberrant past presidency. It's the corrosive impact he could have on the nation in the future. Oh, boy. Could he ever? Now, as Collinson points out, and the book points out, it's not just the orange vomit's previous behavior that's shocking. As you know, before Governor Gavin Newsom of California survived last night's recall or yesterday's recall election, the orange vomit was opening a new front in his big lie Nazi propaganda machine. And that what he does now is he claims that anytime a Republican loses, it's the product of massive fraud. And I'm just wondering when these sick son of a bitches who constitute his cult, when are they going to realize that? That every time there's an election anywhere in the United States, if a Republican wins, everything was fine. If a Democrat wins, massive fraud. I wonder if these dumb son of a bitches still have the reasoning power available to them to figure that one out. I guess not. But the lie that Trump is putting out there, the big lie, and this extension of the big lie that any Republican loss is a result of fraud, is a lie that could tarnish American democratic elections for years to come. And as Collinson points out, the orange vomit's behavior over the weekend, the September 11th commemorations all over this country, Trump used to slam his successor, Joe Biden. That looked rather like an attempt to, on the orange vomit's part, to launch itself back onto the national stage. And at a moment when this former fake president, this disgusting Donald Trump, who was thrown off social media for inciting violence, could claim an easy spotlight. Everything was focused on 9/11, so obviously there would be a camera crew following the orange vomit when he went to a police station or a fire station in New York and made his shitty little comments. Anyway, while the orange vomit and his cult followers are making noises like he's going to run again for the presidency, his behavior, especially during the last 6 months he was in office, and these new accounts of the out-of-control, psychotic final days in office are becoming too crazy to ignore. And the main reason it's too crazy to ignore, although I'm sure there are millions, tens of millions of people in this country, count me among them, who just wishes the fucker would live out the rest of his life and die very quickly. Because this kind of virus, the only way you can defeat it is when it finally ceases to exist. And if Trump is anything, he is a virus. He is a sickness. Unlike anybody who's ever emerged out of the shit and the insanity of the unrestrained Christian fascist id. Here he is, Trump. But anyway, before the 2024 presidential election that Trump keeps farting and wheezing he's going to run in, he's the tip of the spear of the Christian fascist bid to retake the House of Representatives in these midterm elections coming up in just a little over a year. And the price for entry into that race by the Christian fascists is to continue to offer virtual blowjobs to Trump as though he is still the rightful president and he had his presidency taken from him. And let's not be mistaken here. Trump is the dominant force in the Christian fascist pantheon. Even if his more insane conduct may make his appeal in a national election even more doubtful, surely to God, of the 70 million who voted for him in the 2020 election, surely the majority of those people are sane, aren't they? We couldn't have half the population insane, maybe 20%, but not half. Anyway, as Collinson points out at the CNN website, these disclosures in the new book, Peril, are among the most serious and the most alarming of all the shit that has come out about this monster. And if what was said in the book is true, and there's no reason to doubt Woodward or Costa, what they wrote would not just be a case of a president tearing at the structure of U.S. democracy, as he did with the insurrection on January 6th, but what's in this book would also represent a sign that the nation's most senior military officer, General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's hard to say it, believed that the orange vomit was such a grave danger to the world in those last days when the orange vomit was trying to usurp power that was no longer his and acted independently. Mark Milley, you know this, I'm sure, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is not in the line of chain of command. He's not in the chain of command over U.S. troops. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He represents, in Mark Milley's case, what, the Marine Corps? And Mark Milley was far from alone in what he was concerned about. Gina Haspel, who at the time was the head of the CIA, was afraid that an insane Trump was on the path to initiating and leading a fascist coup here in the United States, or that the sick son of a bitch might lash out at Iran and start a conflagration that could blow up the entire planet. And in what can only be considered, a shocking and outrageous, staggering action on the part of General Milley, these reporters who wrote the book say that General Milley had back-channel contacts with his Chinese counterpart, who was alarmed that even Beijing could be in Trump's sights. In other words, the Chinese were worried about this crazy son of a bitch here in the United States. Now, so far, at least up to the time I'm recording this today, Milley hasn't publicly commented on what's been revealed in this book. But he was at the center of a debate last night over whether he had acted out of justified caution to rein in a psychotic who was the president and had gone completely off the rails. Now, some of these Christian fascist scum, and you know who they would be. One of them would be Marco Rubio, this demented little fuck from Florida, senator, who called for President Biden now to fire Milley because Marco Rubio claims that the general had infringed on the almost sacred principle of civilian control of the military by his back-channeling a possible presidential order and negating it, or at least letting the Chinese know. To which I say to Marco Rubio, well, I don't necessarily want to say what I'm thinking because it'd be too many F words strung together. But in times of national emergency like this, which is what the Trump presidency was, I don't think we understand fully how closely Trump took the entire world to disaster because he was insane. A lot of people talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62 between Khrushchev and Kennedy. But one has to conclude that Kennedy was not insane, nor was Khrushchev. Trump, on the other hand, is out of his goddamn mind. Trump is a sick individual that should be locked up someplace for the rest of his life, hoping, of course, that the rest of his life was not very long. So for Marco Rubio to talk about, well, Biden ought to fire him, Rubio, why don't you just STFU, really? You're a senator from Florida. Do something for your state, you sorry bastard. Now, Woodward and Costa talk about what Milley did in the book's prologue. They wrote this, quote, "Was he subverting the president? Some might contend Milley had overstepped his authority and taken extraordinary power for himself. But his actions, he believed, were a good faith precaution to ensure there was no historic rupture in the international order, no accidental war with China or others, and no use of nuclear weapons," end quote. I mean, we have to remember, and I don't think any of us who are rational have any doubts about this, that Trump would have used nuclear weapons in a heartbeat if he thought the use of those weapons would guarantee he could remain in power. Trump is psychotic. He is a paranoid schizophrenic. He has delusions of grandeur. He's borderline personality disorder. You don't need a medical degree to diagnose this sick son of a bitch. All you need to have in your resume is something I had. Just one semester course on abnormal psychology. Kaboom, there's Trump all over the place. At the very least, as CNN puts it, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, is going to come under pressure to explain his side of the story to Congress. That'll be interesting, won't it? And the level of documentation in this new book, which, by the way, includes a transcript of a call in which Speaker Pelosi and Milley, General Milley, agreed on the danger posed by the orange vomit's crazy behavior. And what the Woodward Costa book suggests, if there's more to tell, there's more of this. And if these son of a bitches, these Christian fascists who will sit on the committees, who will obviously question General Milley, if they have their way, they're going to try to paint Milley and Pelosi as the criminals here. And at that point, I'm hoping that Milley or whoever is testifying, maybe Woodward, will reveal what else is in this, what they didn't put in the book. Previous reports from earlier this summer, you'll remember, indicated that General Milley had informally planned for different ways to stop Trump, including, this would have been a bad idea in my opinion, but what do I know? But including cascading resignations of top national security leaders, because Milley was so concerned that the orange vomit's behavior, especially after the election that he lost, that Trump would lose his shit completely. And Milley even went so far as to speak out loud over his fears that Trump would attempt a coup. And last night, Trump lashed out at Milley, calling for action against him. Of course. Trump wrote in a statement, quote, "For the record, I never even thought of attacking China, and China knows that. The people that fabricated the story are sick and demented, and the people who print it are just as bad. In fact, I'm the only president in decades who didn't get the U.S. into a war." End quote. Really? Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. Damn. Now, the book raises some pretty alarming issues on a number of different levels. Among them was that people behind the scenes were even more frightened than outsiders about Trump's behavior after he led and incited the sacking of Capitol Hill. And when you take into consideration where this demented son of a bitch was in his insanity, that puts the attack on January 6th in even more, even graver perspective. Trump engineered that. Trump organized that. Trump ordered it. Trump led it. Trump encouraged it, which shows the extent to which this sorry son of a bitch would go to stay in power. I swear to God, if there were such a creature as a God, I would be on my knees praying every night. What do they call it when you wish somebody dead? Oh my God. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.